So we'll start with where you are. I mean, obviously you're in Duskfall. Duskfall, as we've seen, as we've talked about, is a place of smog and rain, barely any light. Um, you find yourself sometime after your past experiences, your history, meeting with a familiar face, shall we say. You met with your friend Flint, I believe is their name,
Mm-hmm.
and you traded a tiny bit of information. You had heard from Flint that there was potentially a person that they had heard of in passing, sharing information regarding the things that you were trying to find. You had expressed to me that your character, that Ezra, being his name, who goes now by
Blinder.
Blinder, yes, um, had since his previous history had been looking to try and sort of seek the truth as to what happened, the conspiracy, the unknown factor in why things led to the things that they led to, shall we say. I understand that I'm being extremely vague, but that's
That's
simply
fine.
because
That's
we're
fine.
yeah. Yeah. So you find yourself in the Six Towers, an area of town that was once an area of Duskfall that was once elaborate and beautiful. The Six Towers holds is called that because it was once the home of the six noble families, the biggest, most powerful families that had originally started the Leviathan hunting trade and were sort of the forerunners of that trade industry. Since, however, the shift in times and the shift in generation and the shift in money back and forth, most of the um, sort of ancestral homes, mansions,
Mm-hmm.
are sort of dilapidated and vacant. There's only a few families that still keep their manors in the Six Towers. Most of them have moved to Brightstone,
Mm-hmm.
a much nicer place in town that you're somewhat familiar with. And others of them have moved into very other newer, nicer sections of town for the wealthy elite. But your friend Flint often trades in Six Towers in one of these old dilapidated, not specifically one of the old dilapidated Six Towers mansions of these noble families, but like those families, other lesser noble houses have also moved to other sections of town given time.
Mm-hmm.
So Flint works out of one of these old dilapidated mansions. You had your passing conversation. You caught up. It's been some days, some weeks since you last saw Flint.
Mm-hmm.
And he passed on to you that he had heard that there was a specific um, person that he had ran to in a district, in a like a shopping district, an area of trade in the district of Char Hollow. Um, Char Hollow being the section of town that um, is called that name because of its um, location being so close to the mine, not the mines, but the refining areas. Oh, sorry, that's Coleridge. I'm thinking of. Give me 1 second. Char Hollow. Um, Char Hollow is the section of town. My apologies for this. Char Hollow is the
Mm-hmm.
section of town that holds most of the residents and workers,
Mm-hmm.
people who aren't exactly like bottom rung, not like working in the labor camps or but the people who work the factories and work as cabbies and work in trade, mechanics, engineers, blacksmiths, the lower rung of the sparkrights. That those sorts of people tend to frequent the sort of white collar workers as well
Sort of
tend to
like what
frequent.
settles for the middle class
Yes,
in this
yes,
era.
yes. Very
Okay.
much, very much the middle class sort of section of town. Um, it's where the bulk of the workforce basically lives. So servants and dockers and sailors and the ealery workers. Basically, the list goes on of people who frequent this place, and those people that make more money, like shift leaders and things like that, may live in nicer portions of town because they can afford it. But the vast majority of workforce tends to live in Char Hollow. So it wouldn't be strange to you to hear that, these sort of stories pass amongst workers who frequent the ealeries and frequent the factories and frequent all of these places. And in a lot of ways, the taverns and bars there tend to be a sort of melting pot of people coming together from different sections of town. There's this divisiveness in other sections of town where certain social standings and classes are the ones that sort of reign. And so because of that, if you went to like Brightstone or some other place like that, you're not going to see a lot of workers and people, and you're not going to really see the servants speaking to one another a whole lot. But in a place like Char Hollow, you'll see that. This is where they can, head to the tavern and sort of loosen the tie, as it would be.
Yeah.
So he told you that he heard it at a specific tavern. For the sake of this specific scene, we'll leave the name as we'll call it the Midway Tavern. Why not? We'll just sort of create a name on the fly. I had an idea in my head, but then I was like, I kind of like that, so we'll call it the Midway Tavern.
Okay.
And it's it as I had said, it sort of attracts all sorts to it. He had said that a person who frequents there by the name of Frederick, a sailor by trade, but is getting later in his years, was apparently sharing a story with some friends of his. And someone that Flint had spoken to had overheard that story and passed it on to Flint. Flint being the sort of individual that, not only collects, as you're aware, not only collects interesting antiquities, artifacts, and even spirits themselves, but also, when capable, will gather information, especially prudent information, to his friends. So you find yourself leaving Flint's dilapidated mansion and walking through the Six Towers, finding your way through the districts until you eventually, presumably, find yourself in Char Hollow. There, as I had said before, the rain is thick this evening. It's later in the night. The streets are less packed, but there's still sort of a coming and going of places. People cutting back, people taking a break from their hard day of work at the farm or the factory or whatever the case may be.
I kind of Ezra doesn't walk purposefully. Ezra kind of takes in much more of the surroundings. It's not people watching, but it's almost like as a person passes them, he sees them for the first time almost. Right? It's definitely a much slower pace than would be normal. Not with any, even though he has a goal, obviously a destination, he doesn't stride purposefully towards it or directly towards it.
He sort of slowly makes his way there. No specific rush in mind, just sort of blending into the crowds coming and going.
Yeah, not a relaxed way, but like a, it's inevitable. It doesn't seem like it seems like he's being moved along rather than he's moving. That makes sense.
Yeah. It's sort of his desire or his will is sort of like, I've seen moments like that with people. They sort of ongoing endurance task, and they sort of lose themselves in their mind. They're still aware of their surroundings, but they're sort of lost in thought, lost in their own mind. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Sort of. A little bit more observant around his surroundings, but not like as in studying detail or like specifically noticing things. It's just kind of like being pushed along a river and kind of noticing the tree, or like when you're driving.
Yeah.
how you just look out the window
Mm-hmm.
and you kind of you're not really looking at the trees, but you're kind of, you're seeing
Yeah.
the side of the window because it's a different perspective than when you're actually
Mm-hmm.
like looking at the road, right?
Mm-hmm. But you're not really looking at one specific thing. You're just sort of letting it
Yeah.
all pass by. So Ezra has that same sort of mentality. He's not really paying attention to one person or one thing. He's being sort of aware of threats. I would say is what is sort of what you're communicating. But he's also just sort of flowing like a leaf on the top of the sort of proverbial water on his
Yeah.
way to Char Hollow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Ezra finds himself there. And as he's approaching, he uh, enters presumably this tavern, the Midway Tavern, looking for this individual known as Frederick.
Mm-hmm.
He comes inside, a relatively packed tavern. Simple wooden tables, be set in squares, sort of stacked throughout the room. It sort of has like a not planned necessarily with where the tables are set. It seems like at some point, because the tables don't seem like they're set into the ground, that at some point people have moved tables to connect them together in order to be with their larger groups. There's a few empty tables as well that are sort of set into weird shapes or whatever. But there are still, roughly 20-ish people still here, all drinking, interacting, talking. And they have that sort of grizzled look. You can tell that there are sort of social cliques of people, but there are
Yeah.
still those groups mixing. You can see the hardened wool, like from llama being the major source of wool, or goat, sorry, goats being the major source of wool-like material. So like wool of goat wool. I don't know if it has a different name or something like in real life. So I'm just sort of like going with that
Goat.
idea.
Yeah. Goat
Yeah,
fur.
goat fur, yes, whatever it might be, yes. Um, and so thick sweaters to obviously offset the sort of chill of the sea, you presume. Maybe they're fishermen, maybe they're crewmen on the Leviathan ship. Um, and then you see other workers that are wearing, not to say nice clothes, but it looks like when they work, they probably have some sort of covering suit that they probably take off. So you presume that, by the way that they're dressed, you presume they might work in the eelery farms. So they work a lot in water. So they might, have like normally like trudging clothes on, with
Yeah, like
seeing that sort of thing, right?
waiters, like hip
Yeah,
waiters.
waders and things, but they're not obviously wearing their waders out, but they have the sort of clothes you might wear underneath the waders, kind of a thing, breathable clothes. Um, and you see a couple of what look like probably warehouse workers, so they've got their oil stains and they've got their grit, and there's this other than mostly the sailors, the vast majority of people here are sort of beset by soot, just natural in the air, sort of no matter where you work, because of the factories refining, raw, the processed Leviathan blood that's brought down from Skovlin. There is, this sort of smog just in the air from all the mining and all the factories and all the machines and all these things. So everyone sort of has that grime to them. Even you have that sort of grime to them left on your clothing just from the air. The rain sort of washes some of it away, but it's still always there.
My character is pretty filthy.
Yeah, yeah, I
Like,
figured. Yeah.
so like the clothes are very worn and dirty and things like that. He almost looks like he looks like he's been living on the street essentially. So
Yeah.
it kind of just adds a layer of funk.
Yeah.
He doesn't stink necessarily, I would say, because it's not gotten to be that bad yet.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, he walks in and people push past him, and he's almost like woken up, like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm here. Oh, I'm here.
Yeah.
And he looks around at the different people. Not, it's like, oh, this is what people look like.
Mm-hmm.
He remembers this.
Yeah.
And did Frederick have a like a specific appearance,
He said
or
he looked like a. I forgot to mention, but we'll say that Flint had expressed that he was a dock worker, so he would have that sort of dock worker look to him. Probably thick wools as well from being right near the sea. There's sort of swept up winds and moisture and stuff. So he said he had a very large mustache, sort of that he curls up into a thing. You'd always see him in wool. He's a regular. He's usually sitting at the bar, and that if you asked for him, somebody would probably be able to point you in his direction if he was here at the tavern itself.
do I see him when I'm just standing?
Yeah,
in the doorway?
you see someone, you see a few people that might fit that description. You don't see anyone specifically with a mustache. The one person that you haven't seen their face yet is turned away from you from the way you entered into the tavern, and is facing towards the bartender and seems to be involved in some sort of conversation. But they are wearing the wools. There are a few other sailor types with beards and things like that, but none of them have the big mustache. So you presume that if Frederick is here, it may be the one individual whose face you haven't quite seen yet.
Okay, so I'll walk up to him.
Mm-hmm.
Ezra walks up to him. Now he's still kind of aimlessly walking around. He doesn't really, again, his body language portrays a sort of like indifference,
Mm-hmm.
but he is not feeling indifferent.
Yeah.
By any stretch of the imagination. At least in the context of just not caring about people or anything like that. Like, he just kind of aimlessly drifts up to the person.
Yeah.
Taps him on the shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And to turn him around, basically. Not like grab him, but
yeah,
like,
yeah.
just
You
tap
sort of
him
like
on the shoulder.
give him a little tap. The individual turns around, and you immediately see the mustache. And he looks at you. He has this weathered, older face. Easily a man, probably in his late 50s. He's that peppery, very, very peppery, almost like there's only, at this point, it's no longer, dark hair with flakes of white, but it's white hair with flakes of dark. He has a very Scoveland look to him. Very, similar features to what the book kind of talks about, where it talks about Scoveland people being very, sort of Scandinavian-esque, from that sort of vibe to them. So, very, very rigid features, dark hair, roughly fair skinned, like hadn't seen a lot of light. I mean, he works out on the docks, so you can tell it's weathered, and he's seen what little sun there is in the world. Because, as you know, Duskfall and most of the world get very little sunlight at all, like Alaska in the winter kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But otherwise, the weatheredness of his skin does make it seem a tiny bit darker, a few shades darker than it would be if he was probably young and rosy cheeked, as it would be. And he turns to you and he gives you this sort of face like, "Who are you?" Like,
Ezra opens his mouth as a statement. You're Frederick.
I am. Yes. Can I help you? Do I know you, sir?
You
At this point, he sort of turns in his seat to now full face you.
You have knowledge I seek. I was directed here by Mr. Flint.
Mr. Flint. Can't say that I'm too familiar with. I've know of Flint, but I'm not sure if it's the same one you're talking about. Never met the guy myself, but he can be quite the spooky character. If you sort of catch my drift. He says as he sort of leans, giving you that eye, like,
I just like while he's looking at when he'll like look at his eyes, and then just be like, and he's still kind of like looking around a little bit, not like cautiously, but just like sort of like where am I?
Yeah. Like he's like Ezra, sort of just lost.
like he just doesn't really. He's not really here yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know. I, I really need to know certain things from you.
Okay.
Um,
What are we talking about? I mean, I know a lot of things. Um, are you looking for a job? I mean, I I can't make you any promises, but I might be able to find you some work. Like, what are we talking about here?
there's I
It says smell you, he says, and cuts you off completely, like as he sort of like grabs his nose. What is that?
he looks now like visibly annoyed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He looks him directly
Mm-hmm.
in the face.
Yeah.
Uh, still trying to comprehend how to interact with this person,
Okay. Sure.
but pissed off that not
Yeah.
mad, but it's
He's
just
just
annoyed that
frustration. He's like
annoy, like
frustrated. Yeah, I feel it.
it's me. Now, can we get to the part where I would like to acquire some information from you?
It's you. What are you talking about?
Isn't that how this is done?
Why don't you pull up a seat here, guy? Let's get to the bottom of whatever this is you're talking about. You know, it'd be nice if you ordered me a drink to make it worth my while. You know what I mean? I'll take your face as a no. No problem. Can we get two over here? He says to the uh, bartender, basically
He'll
the barkeep.
pull up the chair
Sure.
or the bar stool
Mm-hmm.
and sit, but he's not like completely sitting on it. He's just like, on the end.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I've satisfied the requirements.
Yeah.
I'm sitting
kind of
now.
like kind of like he's almost like not human. Like like he's like, is this how humans do things? That kind of thing.
A little bit,
Yeah.
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
He's definitely perturbed,
Okay.
and he's not comfortable interacting with this person,
Okay.
um, because of who this person is.
Yeah.
Um, Look, Mr. Flint, or the spooky person
Okay.
we're talking about, told me that you could help me with information concerning, and he chews on the word,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like almost like it doesn't exist,
Yeah.
but it's finally being real because he's speaking it.
Mm-hmm.
Corruption
Okay.
in specifically, well, the only type of people who could be truly corrupted.
Okay. You.
Those who serve.
Okay. Are we talking about a specific person here? I mean, I hear all kinds of stories. So, I mean, like, is there a person you're looking for that you think might be someone I heard about? Like, what's the name of this guy you're looking for?
Mr. Is it Spurlock? Was that the name?
Lord Skurlock is the name.
Scurlock.
Yeah.
Scurlock, sorry. Lord Scurlock.
When you say that, his eyes immediately just go wide. Like he's like, what? You work for Skurlock? You can see there's like hesitance in his body, almost like he's battling, visibly shaking. And the only thing that presumably it must be that he's in a public place that he's trying not to like visibly shake or draw attention. But you can tell that he's shocked and almost frightened by the mentioning of the name.
Ezra grabs the drink that's set in front of him, and to cover up the fact that his hand is starting to shake, very very nervously, and he takes a drink, to give himself some time, and he sets the glass down, and he looks back, because he was looking in the glass when he was drinking. He's looking in the glass. Yeah. He puts it down. He looks directly in the eyes, like now composed. And he's like, "Yes, I do."
Okay.
Now, can we carry on with business?
Sure.
Are you sure this time?
Yeah.
You don't want to talk about my coat?
No. Sorry. I didn't know you worked for Skurlock. That's just apologies to you, friend. I didn't know. Let's start fresh here, okay? You're wondering what I heard? I'll just pass that along. Presumably, Skurlock doesn't need to hear how this went. We're good? Yeah?
Sure.
Okay. I heard that he was looking for some kid, some young guy. I think the kid's last name was like Arkady or something. Something. It didn't sound. It's not Akarosian. I think it's like maybe Skovland or something. I'm not too familiar with their culture and stuff, but it sounds kind of Skovlander. But apparently he was looking for him, and somebody saw him in the Six Towers a few weeks ago. And so I'd heard that.
I see.
Skurlock had sort of a, not to say bounty, because he doesn't want it to be public, but he's looking for him, and someone might have seen him. You know what I mean? It's spooky stuff, man. It's spooky stuff. I get that you work for him, and all that, but still, like, I don't know how you do it. Yeah, they said they saw the kid, or the young man, I don't know, walking around Six Towers or something. Maybe he lives there. I don't know. But I heard a bunch of stories about it. Someone said they saw someone said it was like that Arkady is some.
Excuse me. Can I have another drink, please?
Sure. And then the bartender comes over. Is like, yeah, let me get that for you, and he fills you up. Fills it up again.
Like,
sets it
he's
right
now
there.
like,
yeah,
things like shaking in his hand. And he's like,
he's just holding it.
Yeah, he's like, firm grip.
Yeah.
That's enough.
Okay.
Who else have you told this to?
People brought him up, we're talking about spooky stories, and I just shared that I'd heard that the guy he was looking for was in the Six Towers. I was like, yeah, I heard from a buddy that guy, that they saw him in the Six Towers or something. I presume he's some sort of sorcerer or something, you know what I mean? You know those types.
Don't you ever tell anybody else the same information you ever told me. Do you understand me?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I won't go spreading that story anymore. Didn't know Skurlock was worried about it. I just, you know how we get. Toss back a few and stories come pouring out, Let's Let's cheers to our friendship. Yeah.
He'll kill us like
You
okay.
can
That
tell. You
that
can.
went better than expected.
Yeah. Well, you can kind of see it on Frederick's face though that he you said you worked for Skurlock, right? And you can just see that he at this point is very much like he was worried that he done fucked up, and now that he's giving you the information, you can tell that he's trying to bridge that gap, right? He might be trying a little too hard, you know.
He'll raise his glass, he'll
Mm-hmm.
clink it, and he'll take another drink.
Okay, and he'll drink. Of course, he's keeping his eyes on you a little bit, you know, kind of like trying to drink in a way that's not. It's a little subtle, but you know, just in case.
And then when he puts the glass down,
Yeah.
Ezra will stand up,
Mm-hmm.
and now not shaking.
Okay.
Um,
As
move very close
okay.
to Frederick,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm invading your space bubble,
Mm-hmm.
right? And get really close, and almost like kind of half smile.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you know, it kind of creeps out like unknowingly because he's trying to be super serious.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm glad that we had this conversation.
In he just smiles, is just as awkward. He's like, yeah, me too. It was anytime, bud. Anytime you need, you know, just hit me up. Well, while he's going through that sort of awkward, trying to, you know, fix the issue that he had created. Outside the tavern, you hear screams, and you hear someone say, "No, that's mine." And then you hear like a and then some other screams like, "What the heck?" You know, that sort of thing. Like there's some commotion going on in the street, and he
Does it
sort of
does
stops. Go ahead.
does anybody else like turn
People
around
people
and
kind
like
of
freak
like
out
look
about
towards
it,
the
or
door and like kind of look like to see what's going on, and they're kind of looking, but nobody like gets up and goes outside or anything like that. Like it's pretty common in this part, you know, like people get robbed and mugged and all sorts of stuff.
Ezra like looks around and he's like it all like his like facade that it, you know, is like badass,
Mm-hmm.
like completely gone, and he's
Mm-hmm.
just looking around almost like put out. Is like, what the fuck are you people? There's somebody getting robbed out there, you know, like very, you know, his look on his face,
Yeah.
you know, and then he's like, he remembers where he is,
Yeah.
and he's like, excuse me, I'm I'm glad that we had this conversation.
Yeah.
And he gets up and he walks off
Mm-hmm.
without saying anything else to Frederick,
Mm-hmm.
and starts kind of walking towards the commotion to see what's going on.
Down the as Ezra heads outside, he sees in the distance, like probably 15 feet, basically where the tavern meets sort of an alleyway. You know, where as Ezra came in, he might have seen someone out there drunk, like pissing or something. And there is a man lying on the floor, you know, working sort of workers' clothes. There's a woman currently in some sort of scuffle with another man who's holding a knife in his hand. You can see the man laying on the ground is has his hands on his stomach, and he's like heavily breathing, but it seems like he's sort of bleeding out, like slowly, you know, starting to like that sort of realization. Oh, he's been stabbed. You know, you can see you can basically see the shock as he's sort of just laying there like that. You know, and the
Mm-hmm.
woman is fighting as this man with the knife is grabbing her bag and trying to rip her bag from her hand. And she's like, no, not my bag. And she's yelling like, help, you know, like that sort of thing. She's screaming, help me. And like some people are kind of like coming over, but you see there's a lot of people just keeping on walking. Like they're just like almost like they don't care. Like some people are looking over, like not to say interested, but they're looking over like what's going on over there. But no one's moved into action or anything like that.
Ezra half sort of jog walks
Mm-hmm.
up there. I mean, he's propelling. He's being propelled again. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like
Yeah.
not really. kind of indecisively about like what he should run. He feels like he wants to run up there, but then he's not for some reason. He gets up to the person dying, bleeding out. Like I would imagine, like now that like he's within proximity of the person, the woman being purse snatched.
Yeah.
There's probably like an awareness look from one of them or both, maybe.
Yeah. Even the man brandishing the knife, sort of corner of the eye, sees you because the body, we'll say, is like to his right on the ground, and the woman's right in front of him. She's sort of tried to put herself between him and the man who's down. So when you come up on the other side of the man who's down. His what you presume is like his wife or his partner or whatever is standing there fighting with the purse snatcher, being like, "No, let go of it," and the purse snatcher is kind of on the other side of her. So you have the man lying on the ground, the woman, and then the attacker, the mugger, basically.
So he looks around like at everybody, just kind of not paying attention.
People are you can see slowly sort of walking over there, like, what's going on? But you don't see any cops or blue coats or anything like that currently heading this way.
And he looks down at the body at his feet. He reaches down and he grabs the knife. He pulls the knife out of the man's body. And he turns to the person with the that's stealing the purse, the other person with the knife, the other burglar.
Yeah, we'll say the man, you can see on his belt is a few different knives. So he's holding one and left one in the body, we'll say.
And he almost like goes to raise it, and then he changes the look. Like he has like this like, aha, like
he's going to intervene or something.
And then he just kind of gets this look on his face that's just like, I don't fucking care about you, and
the woman,
the knife falls from his hand onto the just and he's just like looking at the blood on his hand, looking at the purse snatcher, and looking at the woman. Like he's just kind of got this like disgust on his face.
Okay.
At both of them.
At all of them.
Yeah, at all of them. He's just like, yeah, like. And yeah, that's I mean that's.
And then he just sort of, and the woman at this point turns and sees her, is like, aren't you gonna help me? Like, what are you gonna do? And at that point, the mugger takes that opportunity when she looks away and cuts her arm with his knife that the knife that he has now, and then wrenches the purse out of her hand and bolts down the alleyway. And she's sort of standing there. Now her arm is bleeding and she starts holding herself and she's screaming for help. Eventually you see in the distance there's some blue coats now heading this way. Blue coats being basically like the police, in a sense. The city watch is what they are. Basically the hired thugs, guards of the city, sort of a thing.
He'll kind of step back, look at her.
At this point, she's losing herself as she's stepping down, and she's just screaming, "Why didn't you help me? Why didn't you help me?" She's just screaming this, like, and she's crying, and you can just tell that she's just overwhelmed by everything. Like the tears are pouring down her face. She's screaming for her husband, and you can just tell that she's worried that he's gonna die, and you can see that like the shock has set in, and he's like kind of slowly slipping from blood loss.
Ezra steps back. I'm sorry.
You hear the whistles of the blue coats coming closer. They're like, "Stop you! Stop you!" But that.
And then he turns it, like, books it.
Okay.
Like. Yeah. And he runs a good distance until he's out of sight, and then he trips and falls.
Like around he goes like, we'll say he runs down through a different alleyway on the other side, like trips, and we'll say the rain hit the stone with the soot, and it just slick, and it just whoosh, goes sliding, landing on his ass.
Yeah, he just trips and falls because he's just like, he's in a panic
Yeah.
himself now, and he's just looking, and he gets up out of the mud, and he looks at his hands, and he starts shaking. And then it's okay. It's okay. So where am I? No.
You hear a voice. Ezra hears a voice behind him, a soft voice. It says, "Why didn't you... Excuse me, sir. Why didn't you help those people?" And he turns. Does he turn?
Yeah.
He turns, and there's a child, a young girl, probably 12, 13, standing towards the end of the alleyway. And she's just standing there, and you can tell there's just this look of almost like disappointment, sadness. And she just makes eye contact with Ezra and just sort of sits there for a second, and then turns and just walks out of sight, away.
Even though she's out of sight, he's still kind of looking in that direction.
I mean, there's time. If Ezra wanted to respond to her, he could before she leaves. I'm just saying that she's starting to walk. She's starting to walk away.
No, he turns and sits on his ass now, just fucking in the mud. You know, like he's like, I'm filthy, whatever. And he just shakes his head, and he's just, and then when she leaves, he just... It wouldn't have mattered. It doesn't matter. One more dead person. But I don't know why. I wish I had. And he just looks up. I wonder how long after the sun was taken away from us, how long it took for them to forget what it looked like. And he just looks at the blood on his hands, and it doesn't matter what it looked like. And he gets up.
As he stands up, he hears the cawing of crows. A few crows land on the roof, looking over him, sort of squawk at him for a second, and then take flight back over towards the dead body, which is something your character's very familiar with. It's the death-seeking crows that are sort of magically in tune with deaths that happen throughout the city. The ringing of the bells in the crematorium can be heard as they start ringing and forever ringing. But now it's like, because the death is so close, it's like the ringing itself sort of extends to this area specifically, even for a moment. And Ezra finds himself walking sort of off into the shadowed alleyway with this ringing behind him, the cawing of crows, the rain dropping down, landing on him sort of slowly, washing away a bit of that soot, slowly causing droplets falling across his hand, dropping the blood from his hand to the ground. And I think that's where we will leave this scene.
Right on.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, man.